thing. There's a good illustration of this, a kind of weird thing that was discovered about depression in the 70s that was so inconvenient that psychiatrists kind of tried to brush it under the carpet. So in the 70s, the American Psychiatric Association, for the first time, wanted to standardize how depression is diagnosed across the US. Because up to then, doctors were just using their own judgment about what it even was, right? So they drew up a list of 10 symptoms, kind of obvious things like feeling worthless, crying a lot, you could guess what they were. And they send this out to doctors all over the US. And they use it. But within a couple of months, doctors start to come back and go, look, we've got a real problem here. Because if we just use this checklist, we should be diagnosing every grieving person as mentally ill, because these are the symptoms of grief, right? Everyone, when you lose someone, wants to cry a lot, has persistent feelings of sadness, that kind of thing. So what do we do? So the psychiatrists regrouped and they were like, okay, we'll create something, it was called the grief exception, which basically said, use this checklist to diagnose depression unless the person has lost someone they love in the last year, in which case none of this counts. So they start using that. But over the next few years that followed, there's this really awkward debate, because they're like, wait a minute, we're being told to tell our patients that depression is just a brain disease, that you can just identify from a checklist, unless there's one situation in life where it's perfectly legitimate to react this way. But that begs the question, why
what
is
about
that
all the other different things in your life?
Why not if you're made homeless? Why not if you're stuck in a shitty job you hate? Why not if you're really lonely? The minute you admit all that, you have to admit context. And that was so inconvenient, they just got rid of the grief exception.
That's
it doesn't exist.
a fascinating fact.
To learn more on this, check out my book and audiobook on depression, Lost Connections.